To the House. Call Chris Farr for you.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. To take a call to the second reading of the Road User Charges Bill. I'd just like to, first of all, do something a bit strange and agree with a few of the things that Tauhine said, and that we support a lot of the substance of what is in this bill. But as is our job in opposition, there are a number of things that we would like to highlight that we do not agree with. Which has been already pointed out by my colleagues David Shearer and Darren Fenton. The changes around the calculation of the road user charges, around the changes from nominated weights to gross weights, is one thing within this bill which we do have serious concerns about. And for those who may be listening at home at 9:45, sitting up to listen to the Road User Charger Bill, who aren't quite aware of the current regime under the road user charges, I think it might be useful just to set out, as David Shearer did during his contribution, how the current system works in order to put into context the inequity of some of the changes within this bill. Currently, the road user charges are based on the distance that is travelled by a vehicle and also the weight that is carried by it. And an operator currently has to estimate the actual gross weight carried, and this is what the Minister referred to earlier as nominated weight in advance. And under that system, as David Shearer pointed out, the first tonne is not as expensive as the last tonne. So if you've got a truck or two trucks of similar configuration, one has 10 tonnes and one has 30, the one who carries 30 is going to proportionally pay much more than that is carrying the 10 tonnes. But under that bill, that will be no more. Under this bill, that will be no more. Under the changes in this bill, the calculation of the road user charges will be based on the usual maximum allowable weight of a vehicle. So regardless of what it's carrying, it will be given an average or nominated weight, and that's what the road user charge will be ascertained for that vehicle. And according to the government, this has supposedly been done to simplify the process, but in essence this is going to make life tougher for many operators, and unfortunately in this case, in terms of the winners and the losers, the winners will be those large firms who are carrying the heaviest load, who are doing the most damage to our roads by carrying the heavier loads, and the losers will be those operators who are running trucks under their capacity, and will also have to be subsidising the heavier haulers who are carrying the maximum weight. So again, Mr Speaker, this is another case of the many and not the few carrying the burden for those who are really doing the most damage to our roads. And there is significant concern about these changes within the transport industry. And as Darren Fenton pointed out, and as David Shearer pointed out, these concerns were well traversed when the Select Committee was adjudicating on this bill. And we agree with the tenor of a lot of the submissions. The first one roughly around the fact that, if this system ain't broke, why change it? There's no evidence that the current system of nominated weights is performing badly, so why do we need to make these changes? Again, rebutting a point that David Bennett made around his difference of opinion around a lack of consultation. There has been a serious lack of consultation with the industry, and many sectors in the industry have been kept in the dark around the processes and the changes and the impacts that these changes in this bill will have. And I guess, Mr Speaker, it starts getting dangerous when the process is not as transparent as it should be, and that will have huge impacts on those people who really don't know what is going to happen. Mr Speaker, if these changes are justified, then it needs proper analysis and consultation, which hasn't happened. This is, again, not evidence-based, but the government seems hell-bent on introducing these changes to the way that the road user charges are calculated. There were a small number of submitters to the Select Committee that were in support of these changes. Again, but it was a few bodies, and unfortunately they were not representative of the broader transport fleet. And as you can imagine, they were those in the sector who were carrying much larger weights on their vehicles. Mr Speaker, a number of submitters also argued that a very high percentage of operators will end up paying more under the changes to the road user charge calculations, while a very small percentage will be paying less. And not only that there'll be an increase in road user charges payments for them, but there'll also be a considerable charge for them to ensure that there was a refit and certification costs to make sure that their fleets met the new system. So in essence, they're saying that these charges, while apparently being brought in to be fiscally neutral and to streamline the system and to supposedly make things much more streamlined, that things would actually get much more difficult for those operators. In the opening address by the Honourable Nathan Guy, he did mention the fact that this was meant to be fiscally neutral, but there was a submission within the Select Committee from one person who revealed that there'd be an additional cost for his firm of $18,000 per vehicle, and over a year the total projected increase in costs for him would be somewhere in the region of $137 a year. And Mr Speaker, I think that hardly is in line with the government's plan to make these changes fiscally neutral. Drilling down into some of the detail in the Select Committee submissions, Jonathan Thompson, the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Heavy Haulage Association, in his submission said that the road user charger bill was a real opportunity to make compliance easier and less onerous, but that the content of the bill, the current proposals, would make things more costly and more time consuming. And in terms of the lack of consultation, he said the new road user charges framework provided in the bill relies on the detail and regulations to follow being acceptable. But that would be very hard and difficult to provide support for those provisions in the bill without knowing the detail. And I guess that harks back to the flaw in the process and the lack of consultation that there was with the industry. As David Shearer pointed out in his contribution, Toll also made a submission around a lack of consultation, and point 2.4 of the submission made by Toll New Zealand. They said the bill introduces very significant changes to the manner in which road user charges are calculated and administered, but its real impact will only become clear in the process of subsequent regulation. That uncertainty for the industry on this side of the House we don't think is good enough. We think we know what's going to happen, and it's going to mean that a lot of smaller operators are going to be paying more, but the fact that there's uncertainty within this legislation is not good enough, and that harks back to the lack of consultation. Toll New Zealand also talked about the impact that these changes would have on courier truck operators in Section 4 of their submission on the bill. They said another area of concern is the manner in which RUC regulations introduced under the provisions could address the operations of smaller courier trucks. These trucks are typically of a maximum permitted weight of 5 to 6 tonnes, but are currently categorised in Type 2, which has the maximum permitted weight of 14 tonnes. So if the road user charger was based on 14 tonnes as a maximum, it could ultimately render the 5 to 6 tonne courier type truck uneconomic to operate. It basically said that this may force some operators to go from one truck to 2 vans, forcing more traffic onto the road and eventually creating a situation where more road user charges are having to be paid. There was one good example of this, and that was North Canterbury Distributors, a chap called Paul Johnston, who said he runs 5 trucks for the purpose of distributing chilled and frozen food. He's got a gross weight of 4 to 7, but in a maximum weight regime, he would be somewhere in the range of 8 to 15 tonnes. And that would mean a significant increase for his cost for his business under the new calculation of the road user charges. I guess, Mr Speaker, this means that bigger operators and the large firms win. And there's a cast around for other examples of where this minister has pandered to big business and has had a lack of consultation. You don't need to look much further than my own electorate around the Kapiti Expressway. Around the road user charges and the expressway, there's been a lack of consultation. With the road user charges and the Kapiti Expressway, the interest of big business has won out over the community or the industry. With the road user charges and the Kapiti Expressway, the pleas of the industry and the communities have gone ignored. And Mr Speaker, as is with the road user charges and the Kapiti Expressway, and the Kapiti Expressway which is being introduced, not enough thought has been going into really what the impact of these changes will be, other than to ignore the ability of those who can't shout the loudest. Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, that isn't rubbish. It's complete truth. You just drive down State Highway 1 at the moment and you can see how the community feels about that. Mr Speaker, these changes to the road user charges are skewed to big business, just like they have been in the...
Sorry to interrupt the honourable member. His time has expired. Dr. Jackie Blue.